We're back on, and you came up with the name of the lead actor.
Right, I came up with the name of the actor, being Anthony Hopkins. And I'm afraid I don't remember the woman's name. They were both, I think she was French, but lived in England, and has done some American films. And is a very well-known European actress.
Well, talk a little bit about cutting, the actors, and when they're working together and giving a film balance on that part of it. Does that make sense in terms of what you look for in the performance and how they mesh?
Well, I guess the most important thing to me is believability, and that's what I look for always, whether I believe the words that are coming out of the actor's mouth. If I don't, in any take, then I tend to allow them to do the talking, but I frequently cut away to someone who is responding in a very good way, which fortunately makes then the actor who is doing the talking frequently look and sound a lot better by not actually being on their face. I mean, I don't know that there are a lot of actors who might be insulted by just what I've just got done saying. But, you have a lot of freeway, a lot of leeway in manipulating a scene to be effective.
Have you had a lot of issues where the scene, that nothing that you got looked like it could possibly work?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I went up to Canada to shoot a film that I think I was the third editor on it, trying to make this film work. Now, it wasn't because it didn't have some very decent actors in it, but it was just an insane story, because it was an outer space thing, and these creatures had come to Earth, and they all looked, just like human beings. This wasn't a real, special effects movie or anything. These creatures all looked just like any other human being, but they didn't talk. They communicated by telepathy. So they just sort of, looked at each other when they wanted to say something, and maybe lift their eyebrows or something of this sort. And so anyway, I was invited up to try to put this film together. And I finally decided that this film really should be presented as a comedy, a real spoof, very serious, dead serious, but as a spoof. And if the producers would present it to the public as a spoof, I think they would have had every kid that saw it rolling in the aisles, because it was just hilarious to have these conversations between human beings going on, and these people from outer space just sort of making all these very subtle kind of gestures. So, yeah, I don't think it. But the producers, they were insulted when I told them I thought they should present this as a spoof, and I don't think it ever really made much of a splash.
Was that Starship Invasion?
Yes. But we had some very interesting special effects in it, and they were all done the old-fashioned way. I mean, the starship itself, we had. I was never on the set, so I can't explain exactly, but I know they used mirrors to have this little miniature starship looked like it was coming out of the sky and like hovering right in front of a car, and you had no idea what was going on here, other than the fact that you knew it was a special effect of sound, but you had no idea of knowing how they do, like today with all the digital stuff and all this. And so I know they used a lot of mirrors, a lot of black boxes, where you put somebody in a black box, shoot their shot, and the black box doesn't register, and it looks like they've all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere. But some very good stuff. but it was all very, very old-fashioned special effects.
Did you do a lot of films with special effects?
No, very, very few.
What about optical effects?
Very few, because most of the films I did were dramas, and used, dissolves and fades and sort of the standard stuff. But, dissolves that maybe went on for 12 feet and, all this sort of thing. But no real special effects that I can think of.
Like you just in terms of like a dissolve that would go 12 feet, for instance, what kind of situation would you use something like that in? When did you use that?
When some emotion, demanded that, to me, at the moment, it just was something I felt that was really, wouldn't play well.
And talk a little bit about, in terms of what it took and especially in those earlier years, what it took to get one of those effects to be made.
Well, I don't know, it didn't take terribly long to do. And when you used a dissolve, you didn't have to see it. You just put on a grease line in it. But I always knew what it was going to look like when it got done. But it may not be done for several weeks. You may have shipped it out, and you went on with your, cutting the rest of the film while, this dissolve was being done. But as I said, this was a problem frequently in television because producers frequently don't have that kind of imagination to be able to see two grease marks and have any idea what that's going to look like when it gets finished.
Did you have to spend a lot of time kind of arguing or really saying this is spelling it out for these people?
Well, what you really tried to do and eventually could do is you never presented the film to the people that weren't actually involved in the making, so that you always had your dissolves in. It's like in today's world. Not only do you have your dissolves in and your effects in, you have all of the sound effects, you have music, so that they can understand what's going on. Because they're not trained for that. That's not their field of expertise to be able to know. It's like in cutting a scene that someone may, look at it and say, oh God, this scene is too slow and it's too long. We really need to speed this up. And I'd say, no. This is a beautiful moment. And when you put music in that, you're going to come to me and say, can't you extend it? Because the music is going to make it build in a way that you don't see at this moment.
And what was your relationship with the people that did the music supervisors?
Always. I was always involved with the composer. When I turned the film over to the composer, I would always go with the director and the producer and discuss what kind of film what kind of music we were looking for. Listen to what after the composer had worked on it a bit, listen to his examples of what he wants to do and whether we thought that was the right mood. So I always had very good relationships, and composers, several composers have told me they love working on my films because they never have to cheat any other music. That my sense of timing is such that they never have to try to extend a piece of music or to collapse a piece of music to make it work in a scene. That once they start writing it, it just flows with the film.
Let's talk about a few more of the films that you've done. Ironclads with Delbert Mann, 1991.
Oh, gee. I don't remember a great deal about that other than the fact that it was between the Merrimack and the Monitor. And of course, in that, we had effects, or I'm trying to think. I think they went to England because I think England had at that time the largest water tank for film. And so that's where they put their miniature boats on this water tank, in this water tank, to shoot the battles between them.
Was it difficult in terms of in the edit room to get that realism? Make sure it was all the same.
No, because that I think I had the footage. So to cut the battle. No, because I had the footage already and just cut a war battle.
Another film we did was Geronimo in 1993.
Oh, that was a joy to behold. My very, very first introduction to the Avid. I knew absolutely nothing about it. And of course, I brought my film assistant with me, and she knew nothing about it. So Avid provided us with an instructor several weeks before they started to shoot the film, who knew nothing about film. He just knew how to run the Avid. So he drove both of us absolutely up the wall.
How was it decided that the Avid would be used for something?
Well,
for this
the production
specific
company. That's and that's when the Avid was coming in and this sort of thing.
Was it something you wanted to do?
Pardon?
Was it something that you wanted to learn to do?
Not particularly, but the job was offered to me, and I said, all right, and it's time, that I learn how to work on the Avid. So what I did was we got rid of the instructor from Avid and hunted around and found an assistant editor who had also worked in film, who knew the Avid. And so I hired him personally to come in and spend a couple of weeks with my assistant and I to teach us how to work on the Avid in filmic terms rather than electronic terms. And the other problem with the show was that I had to make 3 different versions, because this was for cable, for regular television, and for DVD release. So all 3 were made differently, because in some, I don't remember which one, probably the DVD, had much more violence in it. I mean, for the regular television, it was cleaned up considerably from what the other releases were. So that presented a major problem for my poor assistant, because she had to keep track of every cut and be able to tell a negative cutter how to handle, don't cut this piece of film because this piece of film is going to be longer on another version. So we had everything had to be spelled out as to, then it was cut by, we'd have to give the negative cutter the numbers to make this cut for this version at these numbers, make the same piece of film this cut and give her different numbers for it. And the same thing with the opticals. Don't cut, and because there were more opticals in one version than there were in another, so she had her hands full when it came to dealing with the negative cutting.
So you were doing it simultaneously, or did you do the longest one first and then cut from there?
I think I probably did the longest one first, and then we started, being able to prune it down for time on top of everything else, to the proper length for each one of these versions.
And what was after having gone through that, what was your take on the Avid technology?
Oh, I am not a great Avid fan. I miss being able to handle the film. I miss having it in my hands. I love to taste, smell, taste film. And I think it's much more personal for me to run film through my hands and relate to the film, to work on a computer board, to me it's much more difficult to get totally immersed in your gut on a film when you can't feel it. It's certainly much more convenient for the executive producers, the associate producers, the assistant producers, who all want to come into your editing room, and they want, one comes in, I want this version, the other one comes in, no, make it this way, would you? Okay, make that version, the next guy comes in, no, make it this way. So you end up making, a half a dozen different versions for a half a dozen different people who think they can make the film better. So, which gets to be a pain, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm sure, most editors probably won't agree with me, but all the fun's been taken out of it by having to make all these various different versions and having all of these, people telling you they can do it better than you and the director can do it. That's our craft. We've spent many, many, many years just doing this one simple thing.
Did you do a lot after that in terms of?
Oh yeah, no, I worked on the Abbott for several years afterwards.
One of the things you did was A Death in the Family, 2002, Gil Cates.
A Death in the Family? When did I do that?
In 2002, based on the James Agee story. That's okay. We'll move on to the collected stories.
That I did in 2002. And of course that I loved. That was Linda Lavin, who I had worked with on her very first television movie of the week. Because she had been in television for quite some time as a comedian and had worked on free camera shows. And this was the first time she had ever, it was Like Mom, Like Me. And it was the first time she'd ever worked in a single camera show. And so then I got to know her quite well, And so when Gil did the collected stories and I met her again, it was really great, lovely. She was, really delighted that I was going to be the editor again on it, and she is just a wonderful actress. But see, she does a lot of stage. What she really does, for the most part, more is stage. And you can always tell, at least I can always tell, and I'm sure most editors can, the difference between actors that do a lot of stage and actors that only do film.
How can you tell?
Oh, it just shows in their performance. You know it. You can just recognize them.
Are you working on anything currently?
No. I'm pretty much retired, outside of the fact but when we had the ACE affair, Gil asked me once again, he said, we got to get together and do another film. But,
Do you think you will?
I'd be very surprised. He's always very busy, because he's got his fingers into 6 dozen pies. And so it's always, he doesn't, make a lot of films because he doesn't have a lot of time. But no, I'd love to work with him. I just adore Gil and Dennis. They're probably two of my most favorite people. They're just a joy to work with. And it's very nice to work with them because nobody bothers us.
You mentioned the American Cinema Editors event, and that basically was where they gave you a Lifetime Achievement Award this year. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was very thrilling and very exciting, and certainly came as a total surprise. Not in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would be given a Lifetime Achievement Award. It just was something I never even thought about, And then, of course, Gil was sweet enough to be my presenter. And I was just thrilled about that because I knew that was right in the middle of his preparing for the Academy Awards and all this sort of thing. And I thought, oh God, I felt embarrassed, talking to him about it. And I thought, oh God, he'll never be able to accept this. And he said, oh, wouldn't miss it for the world. He said, no matter what I'm doing, I'll make sure that I can do it. But yeah, it's a great affair. So as I say, it was all very exciting and nerve-wracking. Scared me to death to get up on that stage and have to give a acceptance speech. And
what did you say?
Pardon?
What did you say?
Oh, you don't really want me to go into that. I mean, briefly, I thanked my mentor, Sid Levin, for teaching me my craft. I thank Dalton Trumbo for having had the courage to allow a first-time editor to cut his film, which set me off in my career. I thanked all of the other directors and producers who had given me the privilege to work on their film, and Michael Pressman, who did more work for than any other director. I thanked him for our beautiful relationship. And of course, I thank Gil.
What does ACE mean to you in terms of your membership?
Well, it's a professional group that is, I think, very much an honor to be permitted to join it. And I think it probably, represents some of the best editors, in Hollywood. That because you have to have to have achieved a certain amount of work and quality in your work. And I think it's very, as I say, a great honor and flattering to be accepted by him.
What do you think has been your greatest achievement?
Pardon?
What do you think has been your greatest achievement in the field to you?
When you say what? You mean the films that I like the best?
Is there a project that you're particularly proud of?
Well, I guess on the one level, I'm proud of having done Johnny Got His Gun, although when I have looked at it, sometimes I look at it and say, well, there's a first-time editor. I can see things in it that I would not do today that I did then. But no, I like a lot of the films that I've done. So.
Any regrets in your career?
No, none. No. Once I moved into the editing room, I fell in love with the field, and I loved working on film every day. Must say I'm one of the few people I know who used to really enjoy getting up in the morning and saying, oh, I've got to get to work because I'm right in the middle of a scene. And everybody, oh, God, I have to go to work today. Oh, no. I never had one moment of that. No matter who I was working with, whether I didn't like the director, I didn't like the film, like the space, that thing. It was a ball. I had fun doing it. Dumbest film in the world. But I had fun doing it, and the people were great. And
what was the best part? Was it?
I love building, and that's what editing is. It's building a story. It's like truck pulls up and delivers a ton of cut lumber, dumps it out in the yard, and says, "Okay, take all these pieces and put them together and make a good-looking house out of it." And that's sort of how I look at film. All of a sudden somebody hands you all this raw footage and says, okay, put it together to make it work.
And how do you know when it's done? How do you know when you've got that house that's where you want it?
Well, sometimes it's hard to give it up. You want to keep noodling. But you learn eventually you have to stop now. Because if you pick at it anymore, you're going to start being destructive rather than constructive. And that's just, I think, through experience that you just sort of learn that. Now that doesn't mean that I never stopped sweating blood the first time I showed any director the film that I had cut. You want to? Well, as I was saying, I never stopped sweating blood. The first time I show the director what I've done with his film. Because, he's got a very specific, idea of what he thinks it should look like. And so it's always just holding your breath, hoping that he's not going to look at you and scream, "What have you done to my film?" So it's always...
Has anyone ever done that to you?
Well, no, not that much. But that's not to say that I haven't had directors who have looked at certain scenes and said, "No, you've totally missed the real point of the scene," which is certainly true. I have been known to miss the whole point in the scene, and have to go back and then present it, with a different thrust than what I had given it originally. Sure, it happens. But as far as an overall film, no, I'd say most of the directors I've worked with have loved 75, 80% of what I've done. So, a little noodle here, a little noodle there.
What advice would you give to an editor starting out today?
Find yourself, already an editor? Or somebody who wants to go?
Let's start out with someone who wants to be an editor, and then we'll go to someone who's already
Find yourself a good mentor, an editor who you really respect, and spend a lot of years with them. Because you're not going to really learn the craft of editing in 6 months. And it really doesn't matter. Whether you're working in film or whether you're working on an Avid, this is just a piece of equipment. This isn't, where the filmmaking comes from. As I say, this is just equipment, and you can do anything with it. Now, as I've said earlier, with me, I like to touch, taste, smell, and so I'm still prone to really preferring the moviola. But a piece of equipment, anybody can learn it, how to handle it. It's being able to listen to your gut, knowing, to be able to deal with emotions. They should be well read. Should be familiar with the theater, acting, but especially well read. Understand stories.
Anything from the visual end of it?
Well, in some ways, I think you sort of either have a good eye for composition and things to begin with, and then the more you use it, the better developed it gets. But I think you need a good sense of visual perspective. Mm-hmm. But I suppose ultimately, the only thing you're probably really born with, in a sense, is a sense of timing. Because that's really what you're doing as the editor. You're giving the film its sense of timing. And that, because everybody always says, well, sort of the same sort of question you ask, what does it take to be an editor? And I think the sense of timing is probably more inherent in the individual than something you learn, although that doesn't mean as you do more and more, you certainly get your sense of timing more tuned in. But that's really what you're doing when you're putting a film together. You're giving it a sense of timing.
When you watch a film today, do you zero in on the editing, or can you watch it?
If it's badly done, I know every cut. However, if it's a good film and well put together, no, I've always said, if I get to that point in looking at films, it's time for me to get out of the business. If I can't just look at a film strictly as a viewer and enjoy the moment, then I don't belong in the field.
We started out this interview talking about how difficult it was as a woman to join the union. How have women editors progressed over the years since you started?
Oh, I think, considerably. I mean, I don't think there's any comparison. I mean, with, all these lovely laws that have come about that have, stopped a lot of this kind of thing.
Did you feel sexism when you were looking for jobs? And
did I feel sexism?
Yeah. Did you feel that you were being?
But of course, back in those days, my dear, they could say anything to you they wanted, and really treat you however they wanted. But oh yeah, I had all sorts of men offer me invitations, and I've gone for jobs interviews where they've been straight out and said, well, of course you know what that couch over there is for, and and I would just stand up and say, I'm terribly sorry, but I think I've come to the wrong interview, and walk out. That's the way life was. Young women don't realize that today.
And you had no recourse? There was no. Did you notice a point where it changed?
Well, I think it was pretty slow. I don't think it was just because, they passed an anti-discrimination law that all of a sudden, boom, everybody changed, or they pushed civil rights and everybody changed overnight. No, it was a very gradual movement.
Yeah, the last question that we ask our interviewees is, how would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? Oh, goodness, I don't know. I haven't given it much thought. Well, I know that all my assistants always referred to me as being very tough, but very fair. And I suppose in many ways I'd like to be remembered as being very fair and really very kind. As I said, I've never really thought about it too much. I don't know. However people see me.
That's a good answer as any. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
Was it as horrible as maybe?
Well, yeah.